where you live.
I'm clicking go live on YouTube, just so we all know.
Okay.
Watch the F-bombs, everybody.
Yes.
Oh, right.
The height of Jessica.
He was little.
Yeah.
No, that's not. Ow.
Oh, right.
The height of Jessica.
Dogs.
Little.
Dogs.
Yeah.
Mister.
Sorry, give me 1 second. Give me 1 second.
Ow.
Oh, are we live? Are we live? Are we live? You'll have to go outside. You'll have to go outside.
My dogs will be fine unless an ambulance goes by, and then we'll all sing a song for a second.
Oh yeah, we'll get some good howling. I try to get him out at 8 o'clock when people howl, but the human howls don't seem to interest him.
Why did go howl with us?
My dogs.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they love them.
Oh.
Little babies. If y'all's dogs start barking, then my dogs will join in, and it'll just be a big party.
Zoom interrupted by
Okay.
dog. Ever.
The living room talkback. We're in my living room. You have to deal with my obnoxious dog if you're in my living room.
That's right.
That's the nature of life at my house.
Kate, you look so showered.
I know.
You-
Put makeup on.
We are fucking liars. We're all liars.
That's our girl.
I took a shower 20 minutes ago.
Once a month, whether we need it or not.
Josh has a nice quarantine beard going.
I know.
Yeah, like it. It looks
I got
good.
a- I got a head start on mine.
Yeah. Yeah, professorial, I think, is the idea, so that maybe the students who are having their online experience feel like, I don't know, that they're getting any kind of experience. I mean, I don't know. It's just terrible. It's a terrible. Anyway, I don't know.
You put on a
But-
jacket like patches on the elbows and just do like
My
that so
pride
they
and
can
my-
see it.
Right. But Annie Barber was a guest lecturer in my acting class today, so that was fun. They were very
Oh,
excited to have
fun.
Oh, that's
someone
good.
a little closer to their age, so that was good. Yeah, and she's awesome. So
Okay, we have 8 people watching on YouTube as we speak.
The real question
Live. Hello. Hello, people watching on YouTube.
We'll jump right in.
You go.
I'll go. I'm Marcus Turner, the Communications Director at the Arvada Center. Welcome to everyone watching on YouTube to our third in a Living Room Talkback series, this time featuring Smallmouth Sounds, what was to be the third play in the repertory series of the 2020 Black Box Repertory Company. As usual, we always have to give our props and thanks to those sponsors and individuals who make our shows possible. And the 2019-2020 Black Box series was sponsored by Diana and Mike Kinsey. So we owe them a great debt of gratitude for everything they've done. And to every individual sponsor who helps out the Arvada Center, especially in these trying times. So that's the most boring thing in the world. So I'm going to pass it over to Lynne Collins to talk to these amazing actors. And I'm going to turn my video and audio off after you all.
He's gone. Hello. It's always so hard to know. I have no idea who's here, if anybody's here. I don't know. But hello and welcome. I'm Lynne Collins. I'm the artistic director for plays in Arvada Center's Black Box. I was also the director of Smallmouth Sounds. And we're just going to talk about this play. Whoa. Something's feeding me back here.
Sorry.
This is a little different than the others. Some of the other 2 plays we did the talkbacks for Murder on the Orient Express and Midsummer Night's Dream. At least some of the people who joined in with us had seen the production. In this case, we were closed before our opening. We had 3 previews, a volunteer preview and 2 other previews. So very few people saw the production. So it's a bit of a wake. I will say it. I think it broke our hearts in ways that we'll talk about. Not just not being able to open a show that we rehearsed, but this particular play at this particular time wanted to be done, and it was a tough one to let go of. Thought I'd start by introducing our folks here. I was able to gather, Marcus generously supported gathering the entire cast of Smallmouth Sounds. First time I've seen many of your faces since the day we left the theater on the 12th. So, wow. That's something. I thought we'd go around and introduce ourselves and maybe, who you played and also, and in the rep company, and also what's changed about you since we went, what's new since we went to talk. And I'll start. I introduced myself and my hair's gray. And that's the only change I can bear to speak of. Then we'll go to Jake.
Oh, hi. My name is Jake Mendez. I played Rodney in Smallmouth Sounds, and I was Hector McQueen in Murder on the Orient Express. And in Midsummer, I was Demetrius and Francis Flute in Mustard Seed. And what's changed with me over the last month is that I'm not treating my nutrition and my workouts as if I were to be in a Speedo on stage. About it.
Jess and Jeff.
Hey, hi, I'm Jessica Ashton. I am allowed to be in the same room as him because we're married. We're not breaking quarantine rules. We are not being bad people. We are sharing all the same germs. However, this season I played Joan in Smallmouth Sounds, who was in a relationship with Kate's character. I was Lysander and Snug and Cobweb in Midsummer Night's Dream, and I was Mary Debenham in Murder on the Orient Express. And I guess what's changed about me is I can't talk anymore. I'm just like all over the place.
All of us.
All of it. I think the biggest change is like we're all being forced to relax. Like Jeff and I are always commenting, like we would have had 2 shows today. We would have had a matinee. We would have taught a class in the morning. We would have had an evening. And all of a sudden it's like, nope, we have to take a breath. There's nothing to do and nowhere to go. So calm down, humans.
Hi, I'm Jeffrey. I played Ned in Smallmouth Sounds, the befuddled Ned. And I was also Bottom and various sundry others in Midsummer Night's Dream, and I directed Murder on the Orient Express. And what has changed about me is I now have a handlebar mustache.
Woo!
It's in there. It's in there. It's in there. It's hidden, but it's there. Now you all know it's there.
Hey, Kevin.
Oh, hello. I'm Kevin Rich. I played Jan in this production and understudied Mr. Jeff Kent as Bottom and various sundry other roles in Midsummer, and played Poirot in Murder on the Orient Express.
Fabulous timing.
What's changed? I have because I had to dye my hair black for the show, so I wear a hat a lot because I have weird black red hair. My red hair is coming back in, and it hasn't been cut, and it looks so I wear a hat a lot. And I have a couple of raised beds in my backyard I probably wouldn't have had otherwise if I didn't have the time to make them. And I've learned a lot of new recipes.
Josh.
Hi, I'm Josh Robinson. I play the voice of the teacher in this play, Smallmouth Sounds, although you never actually see me on stage. And I played Michelle in Murder on the Orient Express. What has changed for me? Trying to teach acting class online via Zoom. And we have a lot of, reaching off screen for something and pulling back. Oh, I'll share that with you. Right. So yeah, acting with Zoom cameras is new for me.
Miss M.
Hey, my name's Emily Van Fleet, and I played Alicia in Smallmouth Sounds. I was also Greta in Murder on the Orient Express. I miss my Swedish accent so much.
You can do it for this whole Zoom if you want.
Oh, yeah. That's about as far as I got right now. Something about a book. Yeah, and what else did I do? I directed Midsummer Night's Dream. And what has changed about me? I suddenly have time for hobbies. So one of my newest and most sort of guilty pleasure hobbies is doing this thing called Hunt a Killer. If any of y'all have heard of it, you get a box once a month for 6 months. And I had one piling up, just an entire murder mystery, piling up for when I was really busy, and all of a sudden I had time to do it. So you solve crimes and you get evidence and you listen to 911 calls and you get to be like your own little Poirot detective. So
Oh, that's cool.
it's been really fun. That's it.
It's Gleason.
Hi, I'm Kate Gleason. I don't know where to look on these things. I played Judy in Smallmouth Sounds. I played Titania and Hippolyta in Midsummer Night's Dream, and the boozy Mrs. Hubbard in Murder on the Orient Express, or as I like to call it, Murder, She Wrote. And what's new for me? Oh, I got a bike, and I've been exploring all parts of Denver and environs, and seeing the neighborhoods of this town and the suburbs, kind of, if I'm going on a really long one. So it's been interesting.
Weather's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, good for you. I'm very impressed with all of you. I'm a lot less useful than any of you. That's good.
I also eat a lot of cheese.
Yeah. Oh, good. So I thought I'd start just by, this is not a play most people are familiar with, so I thought I'd give a little summary of the play. Smallmouth Sounds by Bess Wohl is a play that takes place in a silent yoga retreat. There are 6, I'll try this so I don't see reflection in my glasses. There are 6 participants in the silent yoga retreat who arrive, and the play has almost no dialogue. It's about 85% silent. And there is a teacher who is off stage who who speaks to the class when they are in class and instructs them in all things personal development and and tries to lead them through this meditation and yoga and centering silent retreat. Bess Wohl describes each character as arriving in, let's see, not terrible pain, bigger than that. Agony. They are all in some form of agony that has sort of driven them to come to this retreat. But because there's very little dialogue, we of course have to piece together what that agony is, what their reasons for being there are, who they are in their lives outside of this retreat. And throughout the play, you're given their lives. You're shown their 5 days of this retreat and how they interact, and learn a great deal about them in spite of the fact they can't speak. One of the things about the play that I loved immediately upon reading it is that it forces an audience to really lean in and put together, kind of like Emily's murder mysteries. You're really a kind of a fly on the wall watching these people piecing together the evidence that you can from how they act, how they interact, what they packed, what they wear, and we'll talk about that all in a minute. So there's a great deal of audience leaning in. I'd ask you guys, from the couple of audiences we were able to share the play with, what was your sense of how the audience was receiving this silent play? Anything that struck you in our little bit of time having people in the room?
Well, I thought it was so fascinating. Jessica here. I was so fascinated by listening to audience members advocate for the silence of the play. Someone's phone would go off and the audience would like turn against that person because they're like, we want to focus. Why is your phone going off? There were shushing. The audience like was incredibly on our side, and I thought that was unexpected. I didn't know how they would take it, and they were all leaning in. We could hear these wonderful little side comments of, oh, she's blah, blah, blah. Oh, look, they're blah, blah, that we couldn't quite hear, but you could tell they were in support of the play, and little moments of distraction, phones, people having side conversations that weren't play-based were like immediately shut down by audience members. It was so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed, especially in the moments, the scene change moments, that there would be a great, like people would really, put on their sweater or do their, like the kind of normal sort of jostling around that people do. They would save it for those blackouts, those little moments when, and you could really feel that it was sort of, they really wanted to get a Kleenex, but they weren't going to do it until there was silence. And we had no clue. I mean, we joked about it in rehearsal all the time, we didn't know what an audience was going to do in this silence.
And I also think it's interesting that because so much of the play, we were all on stage together. And I was also really fascinated by what the audience was able to pick up. They were able to focus on things that I was like, oh, they'll never get it because there's something else happening over here. But they really did. Like it was, I felt they were sort of razor sharp focus on the play and the way the storytelling, they followed everything, which I thought was really kind of amazing too.
I found one of my concerns about the play and its reception was solved pretty quick in previews, because whenever you're doing a tragic comedy or comic tragedy or any kind of human play that has both moments of great levity and moments of deep tragedy, there's a concern that the audience will decide it's one or the other, or a sect of the audience, and more often than not, it's usually the humor. Like, please God, they laughed at that. That's awesome, and then they decide that it's all clowning. And this play so violently would swing between moments of kind of honest comic moments to deep moments of loneliness. And my worry was, without text, without the ability to spin, sometimes like if I'm in a play and I say a line that's funny and they laugh and the next line isn't funny, I can kind of hammer that line home in a way that lets the audience know, now we're on this note, that moment's over on this moment. And in this play, you had to do that non-verbally, and I wasn't sure that would work. And it worked in our limited test audiences. I was really shocked at how well they understood the ebb and flow of the tone of the play.
Well, and not only like understood it, but it was so apparent, like after the first 5 minutes or so, or maybe after the first scene, that it was like totally completely silent. Like it was so apparent that the audience was just on board. They were totally on board. And like maybe still a little uncomfortable because I'm sure they hadn't seen many plays without words, but you could feel that sort of like, okay, we're gonna go on this journey with you, and that was cool. It was cool to just receive that sort of openness from them, willingness, I guess.
Yeah, no, all of that. Who else? Did you have something, Kevin?
Josh was about to go.
Josh, go ahead, Josh.
I was just going to say, I wasn't sure that this play, which was originally written for proscenium, would work without having a specific focus for all the actors' eyes for where the offstage teacher would be. But that didn't seem to be an issue at all, as far as I could tell. I mean, I felt like the actors on stage, their quality of attention changed when my voice came on, and therefore the audience's quality of attention changed as well. So that was a very pleasant discovery.
And I was just going to add that there were, some conversations with patrons who are planning on coming to see the play who, were like, I don't know, I have no idea what to expect. And there was a certain amount of anxiety. And I think what we felt in the theater was relief that it was, in fact, absolutely trackable, and that people were following the story. And it felt, I mean, when you initially asked the question, the word that popped into my head was magical. It felt magical, that everyone was leaning in and like, wow, I'm understanding this story. And it's we'll probably talk more about it, but it's also quite timely.
Yeah, we will indeed. One of the, as Josh mentioned, one of the challenges was we were in the round, although originally it was in the round, right, Jeff?
Oh, yeah. The very first workshop productions were in the round. My buddy Ben was involved in the show, and then it had moved, I believe, to French audience on 2 sides. So I think early concerns to the writing, it turns out that the writing itself has been in many different angles, but I still think it was a really unique challenge because we have an invisible character, and it's hard to know where to put an invisible character in the round.
Yeah, we played with that quite a bit. Hey, Marcus, would you pull up the scenic design thing that I have in Dropbox? Marcus is off stage doing all that stuff. When I chose this play, I felt a little dangerous to try to do it in the round, but there you are. That's what we were about. And I tend to always try to choose one of the 3 plays in the rep to need very little scenically, to have a pretty simple scenic design to not overburden everything. And this play was that. And as you can see, any of you who saw Murder on the Orient Express or Midsummer Night's Dream, basically we've got the Murder on the Orient Express floor. We eventually sort of got rid of those leaves. They sort of kept moving further off.
We also cut the chair.
And the chair, we had no chairs. Yeah.
Not the person. There were people, but everything else.
We added
poofs.
5 people.
There you go. And that was it. And everything that existed in the world of the play was kept very, very simple. When they were in class, they were on little meditation poofs, not very comfortable little seating poofs. And then when they were in their cabins, they had mats that they slept on and whatever kind of luggage that they brought with them. It was super minimal, very much controlled by where light existed in the space. But other than that, that's what we had, was 6 actors and Josh off stage in this very, very simple space. And visually, I always am worried that audiences will get bored of not having fancy things to look at, because there's not, elaborate costumes in this play. There obviously aren't elaborate scenery in this play. And the thing, of course, we all know who love theater is, in the end, watching human beings is far more fascinating than anything else we can do. And this play in particular is so intensely human in every way. I want to talk a little bit about costumes. If you could pull up that costume folder, I was just going to ask you guys to talk a little bit about your clothes in this. We can start with Alicia. So what Megan Anderson Doyle, who was our costume designer, did, rather than renderings that costume designers normally do, when you're doing a contemporary show where you're going to buy everything, you're going to source everything from the real world, a lot of times they'll put together something like this, a lookbook, a clothes closet for each character to sort of give a sense. And as you can see from this, and you'll see with everything, these are very casual clothes. These are very contemporary clothes. They're the kind of clothes you'd wear if you're sitting on the floor and doing a yoga retreat. So each actor, before we ever started rehearsal, had a view of their clothes closet, of the kind of looks that Megan was looking at. So we'll start with Alicia. When you first saw your clothes closet, Em, what were your thoughts?
I'm obsessed with Alicia's look. She's this delightful mix of like really sort of high-end fashionable yoga attire, which we're also used to seeing now, but also just a little bit mismatched. The clothes aren't very well cared for. Alicia, I think, has this image to hold up that she thinks, or at least she's trying really, really hard to hold up, of this very put together person, but she's a total mess. Her life has fallen apart. And so, because we don't have any words to express any of this stuff through text, the costumes have to say so much about who these people are. So Megan Anderson Doyle put this collage together, and I just love it because you can see like this sort of yoga hoodie in the center with there's like a hood for no reason. Like if I'm doing yoga, I don't want a hood in my face when I'm upside down. And just, these things that are really fashionable, but maybe not functional. In the top right-hand corner, there's a little photo of how maybe Alicia packs her bags. And it was very clear to me that she probably doesn't fold her things. She overpacks, brings a lot of unnecessary accessories and makeup and beauty products and curling irons and all kinds of just completely useless stuff, and definitely not necessary for a yoga retreat. So yeah, I had a lot of fun just sort of imagining Alicia's look. We discussed sort of the footwear, and probably she'd be wearing platform flip-flops out in the woods. So yeah, definitely perhaps dangerous footwear as well, and maybe brought a pair of strappy heels for an evening event that doesn't exist. And given that the play is all silent, there's a lot about Alicia that is loud and not just sort of noisy. I mean, she brings gum and things like that, wears a lot of bangles, but also loud in color. So she had a lot of bright colors on, and the shoes I wore had Velcro on them. So those are, delightfully obnoxious as well. And that's kind of what I got for Alicia. I just loved it.
That's great. Let's go to the next one, Marcus. I can't remember the order they're in. Jan.
Yeah. I mean, in a nutshell, that guy in the middle, I was like, okay, that's who. Yeah, I love that picture. I think without giving too much away, Jan was one of the characters who was relatively new, I think, to the environment, and spends a lot of the play sort of observing. And so to that end, I was like, there's a lot of different ways that we could go here. And Megan's costume collage really helped me. It was a huge inspiration.
Just looking at those two collages, and we'll keep going with them, that one of the things we realized early on in rehearsal is the tiniest little bit of information, because you're not saying who you are and what you want, becomes huge. So in Jan's case, this sort of fish out of water look, this is a high-end meditation and yoga retreat, and yet this is not a guy who is in the look. There's a certain look, and we'll see a few of the other characters who clearly have the look. And so the audience immediately gets that, is able to draw that inference about him and fill in all these blanks in his story. So every little thing becomes important. Let's move on to the next one, Marcus. That's Joan.
Does it say Joan? Or does it still say? It does. When we first
no, wait, we never fixed it.
No, I think we did fix it. Did we?
No, this isn't you.
Go to Judy.
This is Kate.
Yeah. Because there were so many J's, I think it got a little confusing between Jan, Joan, and Judy.
I think it's you, Kate.
Yeah.
I think this might be me, because I think that what was interesting is that although the play itself is very short, the descriptions of every character, which we don't share with the audience doesn't know, but these descriptions are so specific that even for Judy, which I think this is me, the name is wrong.
Judy, yeah, Judy.
But that there was actually specific designers that the playwright put down. And I thought what Megan did a great job is capturing that, the specificity of what the playwright wrote, and yet creating it in a way that makes it not feel like a costume. It felt real. And I think that was what was so great. It's also what Megan does really, really well, is create these looks that tell the story, but don't feel costumey. So I think that this sort of encapsulates Judy in a way. It's comfortable, it's expensive, it's probably all very well made. It's not cheap, and it's stylish, but yet mature, which is something I like to say.
And also, if you notice in the upper corner, the suitcase, talk a little bit about how Judy packs.
I think, without giving too much away about the character, I think that Judy's probably a very type A personality. And she also probably travels a lot for work. So normally the clothes that she has are work clothes, but they're also still comfortable in the world of kind of as the sort of Eileen Fisher world, comfortable, expensive. But because you travel a lot, you pack really well and everything is specifically packed. And I think that that was also really helpful to know about the character because we do a lot of packing and unpacking.
Yeah, it became in some rehearsals, it felt like this is a play about suitcases. That's all it's about, is about suitcases and what's in them. Let's look at the next one.
There she is.
And this is actually correctly not. This is Joan.
This is Joan. And it's so funny because when I got the costume designs, I was looking at the other one for Kate and I was like, that doesn't feel like my character at all. I'm having issues. And I was like, wait a second. And I looked at this and I was like, there she is. Because the bit of staged or character description we got is she wears a lot of like Indian prints. And I thought that was really interesting for her. And one of the things that came out of that little bit of stage direction and became clear in Megan's costume design and in the character that Lynne and I and Kate kind of created was that she was a bit of a one-upper when it came to spiritualism. She's somebody who has money and is dedicated part of her life to going to these Zen retreats, going to yoga trainings, going to meditation retreats, but that she's a little competitive about it. And I feel that that's reflected in all of these women here. They're a little bit too tribal. They're a little too Zen. They're clearly trying too hard. And I think that was a big element of who Joan was. Her yoga clothes, her comfy clothes were a bit of armor for her.
That's great. Yeah. No, and again, what you know about a person when they show up in that pair of pants, you know, when they're carrying that bag, it tells so much more than I had imagined how much we learn about each character from what they wear. Let's look at the next one, Marcus. That's Ned.
Oh, hi, Ned. Ned was really challenging to find both as an actor and in clothing. And Megan will probably, our costume designer, support me in saying that I was kind of a pain in the ass about it because I couldn't say what I wanted, but I was really good at saying that's not it, which is really not a useful way to solve any problem. And, you know, what we knew with Ned was that he wears a hat all the time because it's deeply personal for why. We know that he's been through a lot of physical trauma and emotional trauma and isn't very well put together. But what's interesting is preparing for these characters, because there wasn't a lot of dialogue, you know, in the same way that I, as a fight director or actor, look for clues in text, is well, we only had stage direction for the most part as text, although Ned has this kind of monologue. But for the most part, they were more mysteries than your average play, maybe, which meant a lot of it, we each had to make up our own anchor points and backstories that connected to what existed in the play. And that's only in your head. So at what point do you inflict that on the design to come meet what's in your head? And at what point do you say what's in your head doesn't have to be visual, that whatever I'm wearing, I can still do what I want? It's a long circular story to say that some of this worked really well for me. Some of this felt a little gym rat, you know, the flexing bicep guys in the gym. I'm like, Ned hasn't been in the gym in a very long time. And so ultimately kind of settled on kind of a blown out old pair of hiking pants because he's a former outdoors person. He also had a deep connection to environmentalism that was recently found, or that was almost like a religion for him. So we tried to have him, you know, repurpose things, no plastic, that kind of thing. So he was hard to find, but ultimately I didn't realize until we got him detected. He's also, all of us were clothes change horses because I had 9 scenes alternating between day and night. So I changed clothes if I wasn't on stage, I was changing clothes. So it was also a lot of clothes on, clothes off. That's Ned.
Yeah, the degree of speed in some of these costume changes, and everybody's doing them at the same time, typically made backstage, I'm sure, hilarious in every way. Because we're trying to keep the story moving. We don't want to stop. But days are passing, and we need to acknowledge that. That became a whole little story of its own backstage.
Also,
how about you, Rodney? I think that's going to be the next one for Jake. There you are.
There's shirts in that picture.
That's weird.
I
So many shirts.
feel like all of these shirts are too covering for what I actually ended up wearing. The sort of aesthetic that ended up happening was very like proud of my body. Let me connect as much as I can to the elements of air and the earth, and clothing is such a worldly thing that if I need it, it's just going to be so minimal, you know. I think he was a man who didn't necessarily need much, like the bag up in the corner there, the baggage and luggage and stuff. That's pretty much what my bag looked like. It was super minimal. Rodney didn't have a lot of like luggage, really. It was just one bag with his clothes in it and some books, and that's about it. In my brain, he was so worried about being in the public eye that he was sort of calculated in how he would dress, but so calculated that he didn't want it to look calculated, right? Like, plan what I'm gonna wear so it looks like I didn't plan it at all, you know. Pretentious, I think, is a word that comes to mind. But damn, those clothes were so comfortable. They were so comfortable. I miss them so much.
You look good.
Ooh.
You looked real good. Okay, can we go back to all of us on screen? Thank you.
Josh wore pants because he was contractually required to do so.
Although not really. Once I got up in the crow's nest, you could kind of just.
Once you're up there, nobody needed to know.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Our dressing room was very interesting because I would throw on a pair of sweatpants and a t-shirt and be good to go, and Josh wouldn't even do that.
Yeah, I mean, I had no costume because I was just up in the grid until there was a curtain call, at which point I walked on stage and everybody was like, "Who's that guy?" So usually I don't like horse charts in theater, right? Picture of a horse with the label of a horse, but we decided that teacher needed a shirt that said teacher because otherwise, who's that guy? So.
Yeah, no, it was a great curtain call. It really was fun to finally see you because they've been imagining you all the time. So talk a little bit about that. Josh's character is off stage, on mic, always coming through the speakers as the leader of this group of people, but out of sight, way up in the grid, way up hiding in the far corner of the theater, hopefully where an audience never figures out where his voice is coming from. They place him in the speaker. What was it like to be in a play where you were off stage and leading things without being able to interact with other actors?
Well, I thought that was a brilliant conceit of the playwright, because if it allowed me to talk all the time but not be the focus, and I think that was really important, right? Because you really had to look at the experience of the 6 characters on stage. That was what was important. And so the play alternated scenes between, you know, them in class listening to me versus them in their cabins, out in the woods, whatever, and which were much more silent. So I don't know. I was glad it was live and not canned, because it let me sort of, through my little window up there in the grid that they built, you know, they sort of black out everything, put a mesh over it. So I'm sort of peering through this little viewfinder at you guys, but it let me time things so that my comment or my whatever, and it wasn't just words, there were a lot of like, or you know, whatever the nonverbal was, would be timed so that the audience felt it as a much more live reaction. I was thinking about Jess's comment earlier about cell phones and how audiences were so upset. And there was one moment where I've sort of delivered this amazingly, well, to me anyway, insightful thing. And then suddenly somebody's cell phone goes off and everybody's looking around and we all are prepared to blame Alicia. And then you hear through the mic, excuse me, I have to take this. So it's just a funny, I don't know. I enjoyed the liveness of that very much.
Yeah, when I first read it, I couldn't tell if it would be possible to record it. And pretty quickly in imagining it was like, no, this person has got to not only be there, but then trying to figure out where to put him where he wasn't heard, his actual live sound wasn't heard, but he could see what was happening. Because even trying to put him, we talked a little bit about putting the teacher backstage on a monitor, just, watching on a monitor. But even then, we could lose the monitor and that would be a problem. But it's different, just like this Zoom conversation is different, right? This is not like a group of people in the same room. So we really needed to give him full view of everything that was happening on stage in a little soundproof box. It was fascinating, to put him in his little box and see what happened. The main thing I wanted to talk about in terms of this production is what it was to do it. I wanted to start, Marcus, if you could bring up the thing that says script page in the Dropbox. A lot of people have asked when we had some pre-show gatherings and talked to people about the play, and friends of mine who are in the theater have asked, what do you have? What's the script? What do you have to work with? And it's very different. I don't know. I'm hoping this is big enough to kind of be able to see. Can you zoom that at all? Maybe as big as it gets. I'm pretty near there. Yeah. See if you can get something where we can look at it. So those of you who know what a play looks like typically, the stuff in your script that is stage direction is in italics. Well, this play is almost entirely italics. It is direction of what is happening there. So occasionally we have Judy whispering there, but generally what we get is this description of an interaction. So now Judy looks even more annoyed because Joan looks more annoyed because Judy broke the talking rule. Judy finishes and puts away her computer. Judy starts to pull. We just get all this description of what's happening in the moment that we have to figure out how to tell that story, because a lot is being revealed about relationships and who they are. Can you guys just talk about your first encounter with looking at this script when you first got it and what you thought about trying to be an actor in this script?
Yeah, I was very intimidated by the amount of stage directions. When they get that chunky, my brain wants to start to skip over them. And I couldn't, because that's the play. And then, of course, there's the added impediment that we've already talked about, that they're named Joan and Judy. And there's also a dude named Jan with a J, so that I could not remember what character I was trying to read the name of. So it was a slower, more careful read. And so I think I got more familiar with the play quicker because I had to focus on it. I couldn't just bullshit my line because I didn't have any lines.
Every time I was going to address you by your character's name in rehearsal, I would in my head say, I'm changing my major to Joan from Fun Home, because that's the only way I could do it. Is like, she's that one. She's the one where you sing that lyric. And if you ever watch, I'd be like, Joan, you could feel me I just had to do it literally 2 minutes ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I know as a fight director, I've always been pretty aggressively into stage direction because that's where playwrights explain what they want from the violence. So a few times I remember doing Miracle Worker, which has like a 2.5 page description of how they struggle over food, or better yet, even The Foreigner, which we did at Arvada a couple years ago, which I directed, had the same thing. One of those long scenes that is described because they wanted to comically exist. So I was used to that. But what I believe was really interesting in rehearsal was the first thing we tried to do was just stage the basics of what these words said, right? Mm-hmm. As though it was blocking. But the problem is it's not really blocking. It's character. It's dialogue. It's dialogue is stage directions. You could rehearse it mechanically and do each sentence and make each mechanical thing the playwright said happen. But what the playwright's really doing is describing a relationship that is between those lines. Just like as an actor, you get text, but it's a matter of what you do with that text, right? What is your intention? What is your playable action? Suddenly I had to start to create these stage directions as dialogue that involved give and take between two people who had to really, really listen to each other. Because you really had to you had to respond to how they responded to you. And it was a lot, the short answer to that, it was a lot harder than I thought it was. Not because you had to memorize a lot of blocking, but that the blocking was the dialogue and the dialogue was the character. So these descriptions were actually very character driven, which meant you had to understand your character before you could really do the blocking.
Yeah, and I think that's, I know that's part of the reason she gave each of us such elaborate, thorough character descriptions. And I think it's in the script where she says, some of this information the audience will never know, but it was really useful for us, and for me in particular. I can't speak for everybody, but just to know as much as I knew about Alicia, so that when I went through and read all of these stage directions, they were all infused with this incredible backstory that Bess Wall had given me. I remember being really entertained by the character descriptions the first time I read it. In fact, I regret this now because he wasn't surprised at all, but I read them out loud to my husband and we had a good laugh together about them. And I remember reading the play and thinking, oh my gosh, this is so great. It's short, it's easy. It was not easy. It was the most vulnerable I think I've ever felt on stage, knowing that there's so much that I'm trying to communicate as an actor. Emily wants to communicate to the audience, and I don't have words to do it. But it was so perfect because that's exactly what all of these characters are going through as well. There's so much we're trying to communicate, and we either fall short or we're misunderstood, or it's a really interesting conflict to have as an actor and character.
That's great. Go ahead.
I first read this a couple of years ago and was fascinated by it and have included it in playwriting classes because it's a great example of, everything that Jeff said about how it's still dialogue. It's nonverbal, but the relationships are still there. The characters still are, in pursuit of something. And so I really appreciated it for that reason. And then, when it came time to do the read through on the first day, normally on the first day of rehearsal, you all sit and you read through the play. And in this case, it was the assistant director reading all the stage directions. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced. And I think that's when it really, really sort of occurred to me, this is going to be unlike any other process for putting up a play that I have ever experienced.
Hey, Marcus, can we go back to our faces, please? Yeah, I would say, I think we'd all agree, it was not like any other rehearsal process ever that I have been part of. And the thing that Emily said about the vulnerability, I believe more tears were shed in the rehearsal room on this than anything I've ever worked on. Talk a little bit about why you think that was. What was the emotional complexity of this for you?
Without dialogue to hide behind, and I say hide in a respectful way of what an actor's process is, we were all building characters, but they were much closer to home because ultimately without a dialect to hide behind, like, we have, to use in Orient Express, or very specific periods costumes or period style, or heightened language like we had in Midsummer Night's Dream. This was a play about 6 people, and the closer you could bring it to yourself without breaking the play, the more honest you could be. But it meant you were honest. Often I was closer to myself on stage than I've been. I don't know. It's so easy to say ever, but I really mean I would have a very difficult time defining where Ned ended and I began, other than the extreme given circumstances. most of his worldview became mine and mine became his, because I didn't have a character to build out of dialogue. I had a character to build from within, and that meant a lot of me came into it. That was what it was for me, I think.
And I also think that part of the joy and sometimes the pain is that although there was so much stage direction, I think the playwright did a great thing where she trusted her actors without telling them how to think, without indicating how to feel. It was, we were able to create all of that dialogue ourselves. We weren't told, we weren't given, she wasn't hand-holding actors to sort of like tell you how to communicate the story. So it gave us a lot of freedom, I think. And I would imagine that every production of this is extremely different because it is not prescribed. There's a lot of stage direction, but it's not prescriptive, and it doesn't allow you to fall back on anything, because these characters are all very different, but they're all, I think if you're an empathetic person, we all relate to all of these people, you know?
Well, I think too, we were in a world where there was no marking it. I mean, if you are in a big emotional show where you have dialogue that can express how you're feeling, you go through rehearsal and you're like, oh, in that point, I'm sad, but my voice when it's sad does this, and my face when it's sad does this. And I'm able to kind of be a little more mathematical or calculating about how to maintain that performance. But we didn't have that crutch. So it was like, I need to be listening. I have to be listening for the things that pop up in this conversation that eventually lead to Joan crying, because that was the main stage direction, is Joan cries. And it's like, you can't just whip that out, but you can't just manufacture schmacky crap. You're like, I need to be paying attention to what Kate does physically 5 minutes before I need to start crying, because that's a trigger for Joan's emotional state. I need to hear what Josh says in this moment, because that's yet another guidepost to her decline. It became absolutely less about self and more about the people that you were watching and interacting with and the person you were listening to. Mm-hmm. I feel like everybody was putting self to the side and was focused on the ensemble.
I'd agree. Go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, part of what was so tender about it, or tender, I guess, is that a lot of the heavy emotional moments were when these were coming from pain from these people, like just pain. So because we were all so present and vulnerable with each other as a group in these painful moments, was like not only the sadness of that moment, but for me it was like the gratitude of being in a room with people you could do that with. And it's not always that you get that opportunity, you know. I know, Jess. But
yeah, thanks, Jake.
So heavy and so painful. Like it was such a good space and good group of people to be able to share that with. And I think that let me just cry even more, you know, and feel those and be in those feelings even more.
Yeah, I think that the hallmark of what we finished with before we were finished was just that truth and honesty and vulnerability. And I think that's why, because we always had the question, what will an audience do in all this silence? Where will they look? Will they know what to watch and all that? And the answer, I sort of thought, I hoped, and it was true because you guys made it so, is they will watch what's true. You know, that the thing that actors never want to act with children and dogs, because children and dogs are always telling the truth on stage. They are simply present in the moment, focused fully. There's no artifice about what they're doing. And that's more interesting than acting. And this play required that just absolute, genuine truth. As we continue talking, Marcus, would you go through the actor photos? I have a photo of each of them labeled with their name. Talk a little bit about where that sort of journey was for this actor, for this character. That's great. Well, we can look at that because you got it there. That's sort of one of the final moments of the play where they, where you burn your intentions and sort of finish the retreat. Really pretty moment. I love that. And there y'all are. Look at those glasses, Kevin.
How many condos can I sell with that hair?
Yeah.
Characters with a t-shirt that came with the enrollment packet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great shot. I love that. There's Ned.
Doing his stand-up comedy. One of the things that was interesting about Ned's journey in the play as compared to the other 5 is all of us have these kind of fairly involved backstories. And Ned's is told as a monologue to basically every participant at the entire retreat. So while everyone else's stories are more mystifying, his is quite humiliatingly made public by his own volition. And I remember talking to Ben, who played him in the original productions, and was saying that it got cut a few times in rehearsal because it felt weird to tell one story and not the other 5, and they were worried that would create a frustration with the audience. And I think I'm glad it stuck with the play, because I believe our very talented playwright needed to give you a glimpse of one to put perspective on them all. So that's what it always felt like to me, is Ned on the second night finally gets to ask his hero, played by Josh, the one question. You get to ask a question, and he does a 3, 5, 7 minute monologue, first telling all of his own pain, which was awkwardly funny if we got it right. And that was with Lynne's help, helping me find where it needed to be humorous so that when it dove, you'd go with it. And ultimately he gets to a place where he doesn't know how to find peace when he thinks the world's at war with itself, both primarily through the environment for Ned. But let me tell you, to play a character in a play that is saying that the world is broken and how do we fix it is a pretty interesting place to be. So I'll always be able to connect to what he said there, because it was exactly what I say, and with arguments I make. And it was that other example of just art imitating life, where you're not quite sure where Ned and Jeff's line was, and the hardest part with that speech generally was just to make it through it and make sure everybody could still understand me at the end.
Gorgeous. Go to the next one, Marcus.
Yes, thank you.
Rodney.
My gift to y'all.
Let's talk about Jan, though. Jan's got an opinion of this.
Was that before or after you slapped my butt?
After.
Yeah.
No, before.
So this was the start of one of the days. I think it was day 2, and Rodney just felt like he needed to start each day with a little flow, and whether he was showing off or truly practicing, I think that line is quite blurred. Maybe a little bit of both, definitely a little bit of both, but yeah, this is just the start of the day, how he would sort of enter a room, try to get a little bit of energy going.
He was a pro. Let's look at the next one, Marcus.
Hey, girl.
I love that picture.
I just look at Kate like that always.
Don't we all?
Yes, exactly.
Oh.
There's just a lot of love in those eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Complicated relationship. There's real love there.
Yeah, I liked this lady. I liked her. She was a middle-aged lady who was a real person, and I'm like, I don't get to do that a lot. I'm usually teenage boys who aren't real people. So this was no shade on the teenage boys. I mean, bring those back all the time. But I can play those till I'm 80. But it was so nice to just be in a grounded performance with a wonderful scene partner. Kate's great. And I've got to play with Kate on many occasions as the Steel Sisters in Sense and Sensibility. Tartuffe was a blast, but this is by far the most amount of time I've had on stage with Kate, and also the most amount of time where we're not being funny. This was not a period and style piece where we were making jokes. This was two humans deeply in love and deeply afraid. And I'm so glad I got to do it with someone I consider a very good friend. Don't worry, Kate, I don't have a lot of close friends, so I'm not putting a lot of pressure on you.
Go to the next one, Marcus.
Oh boy. Yeah, that was a rough one. Yeah, that's another one of those moments of total silence where I think she does such a beautiful job of creating storytelling here, where Judy reads something that was very private that Joan had written and is sort of clearly, at least by that expression, completely sort of horrified and surprised. And it's all done in about 4 seconds of silence. And I think the audience does not know what she wrote, but I think the beautiful storytelling is it happens and the audience knows that something very serious has gone down. And that was, it was, yeah, I loved that moment a lot.
Yeah.
Can we briefly sidebar about the intentions for a second? So one of the things that happened in this play was every one of us on a small piece of green paper would write down our intention for the week of this yoga retreat. And it could be so many things, as Josh's characters gave us. It could be your intention could be a color. Your intention can be what you want to change about yourself or the world. And we all had to write them. And in some cases, they were very scripted, what you wrote. In many cases, they were quite personal, what you wrote. And also, we all needed about 3 or 4 copies of them because we changed clothes all the time. And it would constantly not be in the pair of pants we needed them to be in. Or more, what happened to me several times is I reached in my pocket, pulled out a piece of green paper that had somebody else's intention on it. I'm like, well, now I know yours. And now I'm on stage pretending this is mine, but this is definitely not mine. And I would write different things in different nights. And then so Jess finally, show's closed. I've never asked what her intention was. It's very private. Jess like, I'll show it to you. She pulls it out of a jar. She's got this jar of her intentions, but the one she pulls out is the one of the stage crew wrote for her. And it's just really crass and not correct at all. I laughed for a very long time.
I have a whole bunch of these because I would wind up at the end of the play with them in my pocket. And if it was tech and we were running scenes multiple times, I would have like 4 shoved in my pants by the end of the night. So I was like, I'm going to keep these forever and they're never getting thrown away. And I'll treasure Paul's crass one more than anything.
Share my intention with Emily's character, but I would kind of never write the same thing. I would always kind of in the moment try and find something that spoke to our 2 characters. But I'd try and do it in 4 seconds flat. So sometimes they were a little awkward, and unreadable, and she would have a deep emotional response to something that was just literally not anything, just scribbles.
They were all lovely.
Let's go to the next picture, Marcus.
Aww.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to unmute. I have 2 tiny, 2 small children in the house who are making some noise behind me. I'm sorry about that. The hearing. Yeah, this is, what to say about this moment. This is at the end of the play, and you know, it's a silent retreat, and we are all mostly silent, but it wouldn't be a play if people didn't break the rules. So you have some people talking more than others, throughout the play. Jan is a character who you really don't hear from until the very end. And I think a moment when the playwright has done a wonderful job of taking us back to the beginning, and asking the big questions that we all ask. That's one of my favorite things about this play.
On the long list of reasons why I want to find a way to put this play in front of audiences in the future is Kevin's character Jan as the last word of the play and the last kind of question of the play, and it's very baffling what it is, and watching Kevin through rehearsal sort of find his way to what it was, and it really landed late, I think. Yes. There was the moment, I think it was, I don't know, was it final dress? It was late where there was you just gut punched us all. You could just feel, I could feel all the actor, because we'd all watch it from the wings, this last moment of the play. And it was just literally like this gut punch inhale. Oh my God, there it is. That's the moment. And I want to see that a few more times.
I want to do that a few more times. It's so, there have been a number of comments throughout this conversation about like, what is the tone of this play, and what, and it's so, it's funny, and it's true, and it's tragic, and like all of that put a lot of pressure on that final moment, I think. Or I didn't know really what it was until the play was about to open, because we were still, and the audience had a lot to do with that. I think just the few, preview audiences, it's just, I say this a lot, but audiences don't realize how much they inform, even in a play without words, maybe especially in a play without a lot of, dialogue, what the play is. You learn a lot once you have people in the room with you watching. And I think this is a great example of that.
One of the things that was one of those kismet moments is when our production decided that the teacher, instead of being down various bombs, would be in the sky and a speaker. To me, it always it added extra notes to this finality, because you're looking up as you would speak those final words, and there was something pleading about it that was beyond the teacher to something bigger. And I think had he been down a bomb, it would have been different. I don't know. There's just something quite profound about just the angle of your face in that photo.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and it kills me. Go to the next one, Marcus. Whoop.
That's a good one.
Not Alicia.
She's busy texting.
She's in there somewhere.
She's on her phone.
Any selfie of Emily will serve for an Alicia.
Do I not have an Emily picture in there?
No.
I know I do, because I know exactly which one it was. No? Should be. There's that list of photos with their names on it. Look. Uh-oh. We won't see you now. I don't know where your picture went. It might have been me. I'm sorry.
I can think of that. It looks a lot like this.
Yes. With better lighting.
Yeah, it's actually it's a photo in a blackout. Alicia's alone in the woods, and there's just the light of the phone on my face. I don't know if that's the one, but you're thinking of Lynne. But it's really.
No, I actually think I have the one with your pens in your mouth.
Oh, well, the pens were very important. Almost, yeah, the pens and the phone were extremely important to Alicia.
Yeah.
I think the most challenging part about this show.
Over there. Let's see if it syncs up.
You got it.
It's syncing, so give it a second. But I dropped one in there just to give us something. You can't be invisible. We'll see if it's
invisible now. It's fine. Yeah. But this sort of idea that not only do we not have words or text to communicate with anybody else, but Alicia really is in her own world, and she's in a prison of her own making for a lot of this play, and there are many opportunities for her to connect even non-verbally with people, and she misses those opportunities on a regular basis. She's so distracted with her journal. So here's
I grabbed the first one I saw, but that seemed to actually capture you quite beautifully.
That's great. Yeah. This is the first scene, and basically the first thing that the first time anybody sees Alicia, and she's got all of her stuff with her. Her bag is stuffed to the gills. She's come in late, of course, because she didn't plan ahead, and she pulls out all of her junk, completely unaware that class has already started, and she's a huge disruption. And it just speaks to how oblivious she sort of is, and how in her own world, and how everything's about her, and it's she's just very important. And so this moment was I think I finally got all my stuff, out, and got the pen I wanted, and got my journal ready to take notes, and I'm shaking my bottle, and I look around, and they're all looking at
Timeliness is important.
Oh.
That's it. And Josh's character says, basically, you're late.
Yeah.
And for me, I think it was the game was sort of like Alicia just being a step behind everyone, and because she's just not paying attention. So a lot of the journey was learning to be present.
How about the Yan shade being thrown in there?
Yeah, I like that. The little side eye.
And the two of us ended up being roommates. So
Yeah, right. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just love that. That makes me super happy. I want to give a try. Hey, Josh, I don't suppose you have easy access to your script by any chance.
If you give me a minute, I could get it. Yeah.
Okay, hold on and wait. I have the video that we have this video that Zach Andrews, member of the company and fabulous videographer, made for all of us as a sort of opening night gift. And it's ended up being sort of the only video we have because the professional video we had taken is in quarantine in, I don't know, some other part of the state or something. So I'm going to try to play this video. And what this is a combination of performance photos as well as tech rehearsal and dress rehearsal. He sort of has cut together with Josh as the voiceover doing his last big speech of the play. So Marcus, give that a try and see if we can get it to play right. And if we can, I might see if I can get Josh to read it to us because this speech kills me.
There's Alicia.
Get to see some of Shannon's beautiful lighting. But we don't have sound.
We could also put a link to this on the YouTube and on the Arvada page for people
Yeah.
who would like to watch it after, because I do think it's one of the most profound video captures of a rehearsal process of an emotionally open play that was cut short.
Yeah.
I think Zach completely captures it.
Let's see if we can get it with sound. No? Not good. Do you have it, Josh?
It actually, I looked for it. It's actually still on the music stand in the grid.
I emailed you the PDF if you have access to email.
Okay. Yeah.
I would love to end this hearing those words. I hate to put you on the spot because I thought I could hear them here.
Yeah, I would like to do it too. As it will take me a minute to find it. So if you have something else to talk about.
Just look at this. Shannon, our fabulous lighting designer.
We could do a round robin closing thoughts to give Josh a little time and each kind of.
That'd be great. Let's do that. You start, Robin. Jeff, why don't you start?
Oh, Robin, I wasn't caught up yet.
I was being clever.
Like, Annie's not here.
I got it. I just wasn't there yet. This is appropriate that right now we're doing a Zoom with his square empty. It feels like rehearsal when Josh would be up in the grid and we'd be like, oh, there's 7 people in this play.
Josh is in this?
I would say 2 short things about this play. One was I never really thought about the sheer panic of a quick change show when you're backstage and have literally no text to listen to have any sense of whether you were ahead, behind, or on time of your changes. And it was obscenely challenging to realize that I don't know how long any of these moments are, and I can't listen to them because it's all silent. I would count it off of laughs if I knew how many there were, but we haven't done it, so I just don't know. And then in terms of I listened to something. In terms of the piece itself is, I don't know if I would have ever been able to say goodbye to it because of how close it hit. And I miss it. I'm surprised how much I miss it. And I'm surprised that I can look up and know tonight was Smallmouth Sounds. Because I kind of feel like my body somehow knows that that's what I was about to go through. And there's a gearing up to a show like that, and there's a release to a show like that, and there's a sense of ensemble quite not like I've ever felt in any play and may ever again. I don't know that there are plays designed to do what this play does as well as this play does it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in his square, so I'll just talk next up. I think that this whole play for me was about relationship. And not in a dialogue-y way that somebody wrote a play of someone and their mother. It's so much deeper than that. It's about the relationship of everybody on stage, all the characters on stage. And even if in a play, like, I didn't have any stage directions to Emily. I didn't really have any stage directions to Kevin. My character didn't interact with them. I had no equivalent of dialogue, but there was still a relationship. Those 6 humans were still breathing the same air, and I was in relationship to them. And not only relationship character to each other, but actor to each other, actor to director, cast to crew. We had so much support backstage, unlike anything I've seen on a show, because they could tell we were vulnerable. And finally, the relationship of actor to audience, which was the next piece I was so excited to discover. To what did you all at home think? Let's talk about it. And we didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Piggybacking off of what Jess said, I think at least a lot of what Alicia's journey was, and I think everybody is, each of these characters came to this place looking for something, a solution to their problem or an answer or a quick fix. And each came to that space with an extreme amount of pain and a feeling of being alone. And it's amazing in this moment now of isolation how alone being alone really feels, and how I wish personally that I had taken advantage more of the relationships, just like Alicia was so oblivious to connection until the very end. It's a real lesson that we all can take, that we should take advantage of connection every moment we can.
So I have the text if you want. I want to say there's one line from the play not in this text that hits me every day, which is, "It is what it is, not what we would like it to be." And that is quarantine in a nutshell. But I'll give you the experience as these guys had the experience, right? So I'll turn my video off and you will hear it rather than, "This is the story of life. You are born, you are placed on a boat, and you sail out into the middle of the vast and beautiful ocean. And then the boat sinks. Oh well. If you can accept this truth, if you can stay with it, you may soon realize that in this complete disaster, this charnel ground, this sinking ship, you are not alone. And if you don't believe me, well, you are not alone. And if you are scared of what's to come, you are not alone. If you are hungry, you are not alone. Deeply hungry, or just wanting a bag of peanuts. If you are full of regret, or hope, or desire. If you are homesick. If you miss your mother or father. If you are in pain in your hip, or your back, or your heart, or your bones, you are not alone. And if after all this, after accepting and sitting with this, you still feel alone, Well, I'm sorry, but you are not alone. And breathing in, breathing out.
And I think with that, we should say goodbye. Yes. Just let that be. I love you all very much.
We love you, friends.
Love you.
Love you, miss you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Josh. You're beautiful.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
I miss you guys.
You too.